Right then, let's finally get down to talking about the minutes of that meeting that happened at Celtic Park on Monday. I know a few of you have probably been wondering why it's taken so long. No worries, no fear. Ryan 118 is here. It's time to look through that document that detailed everything that was discussed at the meeting on Monday, and it's time to rant and moan again. Everybody's favourite time of the week. If you haven't already, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. It would be much appreciated. Hello, it's good to see you. I know this has taken a little bit longer than it should have. These results were published last night around 5 o'clock. It's well more than 24 hours on by the time I post this video. It's been incredibly busy shopping for a new car. The new PC has arrived today. It's been a very, very busy 24 hours for myself. So I'm finally getting down to talking about it. And I'm just going to do it straightforward. No arsing about. We're going to look through the document. We're going to discuss everything. I'm going to give my opinions on it all. And once more, we're going to discover why the Celtic board are just purely and blatantly unfit for purpose. And thank you so much, by the way, to everybody who has just watched every single one of these videos and just stuck with the process of me repeating myself time and time again. I know it can be a bit tiresome, and I don't mean to be overly negative, and I feel like I'm saying that a lot, never mind anything else. But I do appreciate the support you have been giving these videos. It's just a very delicate time at Celtic Football Club. And I said it right from the get-go. This platform, my platform, will be used to try and bring everybody on the same side. I think it's important that we all use our voices to show exactly how bad these crooks are at running Celtic. And that's what I'll continue to do. However, they make it a very easy job, it must be said, and you'll see why when we go through the minutes of this meeting. So this is a long document. All 10 pages were published at 5 p.m. last night. It detailed every conversation that was had in the room at Celtic Park on Monday, and it also listed everybody who was an attendee. This was an agreed minute of meeting that was kind of put together by both the club attendees that included Michael Nicholson and Chris Mackay, and also the supporter attendees, which went across several different fan organisations and such, including, of course, the Celtic Fans Collective. It's a long document. It's 10 whole pages. And don't worry, I'm not going to sit here and read every single section word for word. We'd be here all day if I'd done that. But we are going to dissect all of the main points. We are going to look over the bits that have been highlighted greatly. And ultimately, I'm going to do what I do here on this channel. I'm going to put my opinion in. I'm going to give my opinion on certain things. And I'm going to talk about the failings of this club yet again. So we'll start from the top, and I am just going to scroll through the document and talk about it. That's all this video is. I just want it to be a proper run through. So we could do a live stream over the weekend, perhaps, or next week, where we talk about it a bit more in depth. But I am going to just kind of go through sections and give my thoughts. The club attendees included Michael Nicholson, Chris Mackay, John Paul Taylor, Mark Hargreaves, Kevin McQuillan, and George Campbell. Now that was confirmed, of course, through the initial statements that were released by both the Celtic Fans Collective and the club through earlier in the week before the minutes of the meeting were published. And of course, these are the list of the supporter attendees as well. We don't need to go through all of them individually, but some of the names you might recognise. They represented a number of different associations, including the Affiliation of Supporters Clubs, the Irish Supporters Clubs, Celtic Disabled Supporters Association, the Collective, the Supporters Association, CSA, Celtic Trust, and the North of Ireland Supporters Clubs. So, yes, the meeting started, and Michael Nicholson opened the meeting thanking everyone for attending, confirming that the club are aware of issues that the supporters have raised and wish to discuss with the club. Concerns have also been raised with the club about the potential impact for the team on the pitch. And the club had arranged the meeting to discuss a way forward. The club invited the recognised representative supporters groups to attend the meeting, as we have done in the past, most recently in relation to the Fairhurst report. The club received a response this morning with further attendees from the Celtic Fan Collective, and the club is keen to make progress and to make arrangements work this evening. Of course, the evening of the meeting. Michael Nicholson acknowledged that the club is not in a place where we want it to be, and that some recent communications have not been well received by supporters. The club wants to find a way forward, which allows us to seek to address concerns while backing the team on the pitch. We respect that everyone is entitled to their view, and we would hope that we can discuss respectfully. We're going to have differences, but the fundamental we all share is for success at Celtic, and we want the team to win. The club wants to find a way forward, and he then asked for any thoughts from the meeting of the people that were there in attendance. So yeah, general opening as you would expect, everything hunky dory at this point. Good, we're on the right track. Do I believe them in saying that they want the best for the club, the same as the supporters? No, of course I don't. But we'll leave that for the end of the actual document itself. We'll get to that. I think that it's in plain sight that they clearly don't share the same ambitions, but we keep getting told they do. The same stuff we've been getting told for years. That's how they opened the meeting, and of course they will be probed on that as the meeting unfolds. At this point, of course, the opening comments came from the attendees, which basically just reiterated the points that we have been making. You know, we said that we are looking for the answers to the 7 questions that were put on the open letter to the club. The Celtic Collective has been formed to try and cover a wide variety of different opinions within the Celtic support. They used the point that we are not world class in everything that we do, which is of course something that the club parade usually, and of course we have it plastered on the walls of the changing room, but that is of course not something that we can sit here and say we believe, because we're not world class, and they don't believe that there's good communication between the CEO and the fans. So basically everything that you would expect us to say to the board's faces, we did say that. When I say we, I am of course meaning the collective we. I was not present, just to reiterate, I was not present at the meeting on Monday. I'm a proud signatory of the Celtic Fans Collective. I stand with the Celtic supporters and the collective. I'm using the term we as a collective. I wasn't there. This is where we actually get started, right? The fun and games are out the way, the opening statements are out of the way. We actually get into the kind of the meat of it all here. I keep saying Martin. Michael Nicholson confirmed that the club was aware of the questions, together with similar correspondence received by emails directly to club colleagues. But Nicholson confirmed the club did not believe it was appropriate to respond in writing at the time the 7 questions were first published. So they said it was difficult to explain all the variables in written form. And, you know, I understand that these are complex questions. They aren't something that can be answered with yeses and nos. But to start disguising your inability to answer these questions with the excuse of complexity doesn't take away from the plain ignorance you treat the supporters with. And that was one of the things I picked up. This is straight away off the back of the meeting. Like, I understand it's difficult. I'm not expecting Celtic to be publishing the exact answers to all of these very difficult questions on a bit of paper for us to read. It's not as easy as that. But to completely ignore them makes no sense. There should be an answer. And to say that they didn't believe it was appropriate to just respond in writing is just a complete negligence towards the people who are paying to keep the lights on. That's what we're doing, by the way. We're not just, you know, diddies that are thinking that we're a bigger part of the process than what we actually are. No, we quite literally fund the club. We quite literally pay the bills. We pay the wages of the players. We pay for the lights. We pay for the stoves around the stadium. To say that it wasn't appropriate to answer the questions at the time and then to use the excuse of complexity, I think is just a very cheap and lazy way to say, we're not giving you the answers. Because it doesn't feel like this meeting actually provided all the answers we were looking for anyway to those questions. So at what point do we just draw the line and say, you have no intention of actually answering them? You know, that's where my problems lie. And at what point do you stop deflecting blame to every other possible avenue rather than accepting it yourselves? So Mackay and Nicholson acknowledged that the statement that was released on September 7th, 2025, which was the one that was published at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night that looked written by ChatGPT, they acknowledged it wasn't well received, noting that it further highlights the importance of having these discussions with supporters to provide further context. The meeting also acknowledged more general concerns regarding the tone and delivery of the statement and how this was viewed by supporters as insulting. So Nicholson confirmed that was not the intention. Nicholson reminded Celtic fan collective that they do not speak for all supporters, and confirmed that some supporters defended the club statement. When asked why there was no signature on the statement, Nicholson declared this was normal practice and the statement was released on behalf of the board. So let's just forget about the signature at the end here. This line here is just absolute buzz. It's once again just lies for the sake of lies. I can't find a supporter who defended the statement. Anybody who did defend the statement hides behind an anonymous account on Twitter. How are you even meant to verify that's a real Celtic supporter? It could be a Rangers fan in disguise. I have not heard one fan in a pub, on a supporters bus, on my YouTube streams, comment sections, any fan that shows their face on Twitter, walking to the game, people that I meet in the street that watch the channel. I've not met one who defended the actions of the statement. And for them to remind the Celtic fans collective that they do not speak for all supporters is once again them just driving that wedge of division, isn't it? It's their intention to just try and drive that wedge of division in there because they accept that they're the ones that have to. They're on the back foot here. They don't have any defence for what they've said. The statement wasn't meant to be insulting. Well, it was, and yous wrote it. Yous greenlighted it. Yous are the highly qualified professionals. Yous are the ones that are able to write at that business level. So where is your abilities? Where are your skills? What did you get employed for in the first place if you can't communicate? And then to hit out with that line, it's once again that high horse looking down on the supporters in the room. We know we don't speak for the whole support. The people in the room know they don't speak for the whole support. But to come out and say that there was fans that defended the statement when they're very clearly in a tiny minority, and I mean tiny, I think I'd be willing to put myself on the line here and say that at least 90% of Celtic supporters were insulted by the statement, and 90% were in favour of what the collective were saying in response to the club statement, and the majority of people were against that club statement altogether, and they're hitting out with that. It's nonsense. And to use the point of fan forums as their communication with supporters, nobody ever knows what happens at these fan forums. I've never, ever, ever heard of anything that comes from these fan forums. I don't even know who gets invited to the fan forums. You can't use that as your excuse for communication with the club when the vast majority of supporters that I know, and including myself, don't have a clue what goes. Nothing gets published about them. No minutes of meetings, no statements, nothing. So you can't go out and say that you've got these, meetings with fans forums and the AGM when the vast majority of supporters just have no clue what goes on behind these closed doors. What kind of communication with the fans is that if it's a closed shop and nothing leaves the room? It's pointless. So yeah, once again, citing cheap excuses that they don't have actual physical evidence to back up stuff with. They don't have any evidence to suggest that they have fans that defended them. Show us it then. Show us it. But they didn't have any. There was a brief conversation about the removal of directors. Of course, that was something that the Celtic fans collective made clear they would tone down in the room out of respect for the complexity of the situation. They said that's a matter for the board and shareholders, and that was pretty much all that was said in regards to the club's business affairs, including individuals and such. And honestly, I mean, that's probably one of the only areas here that I can go, okay, understandable. It's not as if Michael Nicholson's going to sit in the chair across from supporters and go, yeah, you know what, I probably should resign. I knew that was going to be the case. Nicholson cleared up the club's strategy, saying that it's to be a world-class football club, including dominating Scotland and competing in the Champions League, even though we have failed to qualify for the Champions League, based on the creation of Champions League players through the academy, player recruitment, player trading, technical functions, and development of training facilities. Now, all of that is, I mean, some of it applies to what we've seen. We've seen the likes of recruiting Matt O'Reilly, making him a Champions League player, etc. But, to cite the youth academy when we have like two players who are probably, Kieran Tierney, Callum McGregor, and maybe, we might have what Ben Gannon Doak to look on in future years. Like, we don't create Champions League players. We don't. And it doesn't count when you have Tony Ralston, who's used as a backup right back. We don't create Champions League players. So I don't know why that seems to be a narrative we're peddling here. The player trading and recruitment and such, I get it. We know our model. We know where we shop. But it wasn't used. I mean, if it was used right, we'd have qualified for the Champions League, which led them into a conversation about the transfer window. Michael Nicholson highlighted past transfer windows as an achievement and said that we have had success in windows, which obviously is true to an extent. I'm not just going to say that they're wrong on every basis, and accepted that they've got things wrong this time round. But they can't comment on individual players. Michael Nicholson noted that two key concerns had been raised by supporters during the transfer window: the timing of transfers and the level of investment relative to cash reserves, and that club accepted that its communication on these issues has not been well received. So apparently we assess, this is the part I'm at here, we assess player recruitment continually, but cannot necessarily share publicly. Once again, understandable to an extent. But the club is invested for short, medium, and long term, and they continue to back their methods. When asked if the club had identified what went wrong during the summer transfer window, Michael Nicholson confirmed that an internal process of review is ongoing, which will focus on what went right or wrong and examine against relevant factors, including personal career objectives, selling and buying clubs' aims, agents' taxation. So once again, it is this notion of we're looking into it. Will we ever actually publish results? Will we ever find out the results? Maybe if you keep getting on it. But that to me sounds like something that is like, yeah, we're looking into it. And I don't think they actually are. Now I know they can't share a lot of business details publicly, and I know that it's difficult. But to continuously cite investigations are ongoing, we're looking into things, I feel like it's a story we've heard a million times and then we never really know. And then you've got to rely on things that get shared about on forums and things from people who are in the know and from people that know folk that work at the club. We never actually know the real answers. And of course, we're going to hear things about agents and taxation, etc., etc. And the fact is, it just doesn't answer the question as to how this was such a bad window. How long does it, like, do you know what really winds me up? Just be honest about it. And I think that you get a lot more respect. Just sit there and go, aye, we made an arse of it. We left things to the last minute. We didn't scout effectively. We didn't scout properly. And we didn't achieve what the targets we were looking for. Just be honest. Stop fannying about. Stop pussyfooting around the truth. It really winds me up because it could be so simple for them to come out and just say, "Aye, we should have done better," because everybody can see it from ex-pros that sit in the studios to the most stupid of fans. We can all see it. It's so easy. So how can they not just be honest about it? That's what's winding me up. So of course the issue of timing came up and not preparing for the Champions League qualifiers, and they cited the examples of Kieran Tierney and Benjamin Negren that they actually do aim to complete business as soon as possible. But just because you did make two signings in time, by the way, one of them being a pre-contract for a former player, doesn't let you away with it. And this is what they keep doing. They keep just because you have one small example of doing what we're looking for doesn't speak for the wider need of what the club should be doing. You can't just go, but we signed Negren. Well done. You signed a guy that had 6 months left in his contract for £1.5 million. That should be a tiny piece of the puzzle. And if Rangers could go out and make so many, and listen, I know they're not a great example to use because their signings end up tripe half of the times. But if you can go out and if they can go out and make plentiful signings before qualifiers, why can't we? You can't just keep saying it's difficult, it's difficult. Every club bar us seems to do it. You can't just point to the only example you have of doing something right and pass it off as your wider success. It doesn't work like that. And then they didn't, and then this is where it starts to just get, just all of it just gets annoying. The club did not accept that there is a disconnect between the board and the manager about transfer policy. Brendan Rodgers himself dubbed players as club signings and not his signings. There is clearly a disconnect. So either pull together and say the same things, be consistent, or just admit that there has been a rift. Just admit it. There is no shame. Which leads me down the document a little bit to this bit here, the one that's doing the rounds and the bit that's standing out the most. The manager was asked, or sorry, there was a question asked about why the manager referred to some players as club signings, and Michael Nicholson shrugged his shoulders. A guy who can't pick up the phone, apparently, a guy who can't reply to emails, a guy that can't speak to the supporters, and now a guy that shrugs his shoulders. You're telling me there isn't a disconnect when you can't speak on this matter? This line here of Michael Nicholson shrugging his shoulders says everything about any potential disconnect. You must know why Brendan Rodgers said it if there's no disconnect. Surely you are in community. Surely you understand each other and you are working on this same wave if there's no disconnect. No, you shrug your shoulders because you know for a fact that you've been proven a dafty. These guys, by the way, just to make it clear, these guys are paid six-figure salaries per year. Probably by the time they get their bonuses and such, they're in the millions. And they couldn't run a fucking bath. Um, how can you sit there and shrug your shoulders at a question when you're earlier on in the same meeting apparently giving the answers across? Brendan Rodgers prove publicly that there is a disconnect. And you know that. So stop lying. Stop it. And you wouldn't have to shrug your shoulders at a question. Answer. Use some words. Use some of your dignity and give your supporters the answers they're looking for. And to switch away from transfers for a moment, while we're talking about Brendan Rodgers, I think the other bit that's doing the rounds and the bit that I felt very strongly about was in relation to the leaked tabloid story surrounding Brendan Rodgers and his relationship with the Celtic board. It was brought up and there were serious concerns regarding the alleged leak to the Sun, and it was suggested that this was a grave breach of trust and professionalism. The club was asked to address this. Michael Nicholson noted that the allegation was based on an unnamed source allegedly speaking to an unnamed source at the club. There's a lot of speculation printed in the tabloid press. The matter had been discussed with the board and with the football manager, and the matter was closed. We that earlier in the week. Chris Mackay said all board members had been asked about the article and there was no basis for further investigation. So basically what's happened here is they went round, everybody went, was that you? No. Okay. The wee Tory boys club looking out for one another. You know, Brendan Rodgers sadly left to have his name slandered across a public, a kind of widespread mainstream newspaper, very publicly, and just disregarded. It wasn't to be investigated further. And when asked if whether there was going to be legal action taken or anything done about it, Michael Nicholson said that the club was busy enough as it is. That was his response. Busy enough as it is to go and deal with a very, very serious allegation to do with senior members at the board and the club's actual manager. Busy enough as it is. Fair enough. If Brendan Rodgers doesn't feel like it's that big a deal and he's just ready to move on from it, cool, whatever. He's the one that it affects most, in my opinion. But say what you like about how we've been playing recently, and take your personal opinions aside of the guy for a minute if you're not a huge Rodgers fan. Nobody, no manager at Celtic should be treated like that or go through that. And it's embarrassing that this is the level of defence that they're going through to help their very successful club manager, one that they pay very highly, actually. Busy enough as it is, go and hire some more fucking staff then. Spend the millions you've got in the bank and the cash reserves to hire some people that can look into it if you just can't be arsed. That to me is we can't be arsed. We'll look out for one another, we'll look out for each other's pockets, but we're too busy to look into something that should be taken rather seriously. I think that this is a very delicate issue to dance around because it does have there's a lot of kind of moving parts, and there's a lot of confidentiality involved in it. But at least pretend like you take it seriously. Don't say we asked about and nobody had any answers. Look into it or hire somebody to look into it for goodness sake. This is embarrassing for a football club, but this is the kind of thing you'd expect to hear about a juniors club. You know, something going about Auchinleck Talbot or something. You know, and it's Celtic. It's embarrassing, absolutely embarrassing, and it really pissed me off to see that that's the care and the concern that they give about the manager and his name being slandered across a mainstream newspaper. And just to sum everything up in relation to the attitude of these guys, and in particular Michael Nicholson, who has not covered himself in glory these past few weeks, and in particular these last few days, when they were asked about the club's structure and competing in Europe and why we're consistently unprepared for qualification stages, Michael Nicholson stated that the club did not accept the premise of this question. What do you mean you don't accept the premise of the fucking question? Do we need to fucking spell it out for you, you clown? Like, I don't mean to get aggressive and call people names, but this is fucking straight up stupid. You don't accept the premise of the question. What do we need to do? We weren't prepared. We haven't been prepared. For a vast majority of these qualification campaigns, we're so lucky that we've automatically qualified the last 3 years before this season. Because we'd have probably been in this situation before now. What do you mean you don't accept the premise of the question? Oh, wait, we appointed Paul Tisdale. Well done. You appointed somebody in a job that should be filled. Congratulations. What do you want? Fucking chocolate medal. This is it. This is it. He shrugs his shoulders. He does not accept the premise of questions. What the fuck do you do then? What is your? Why are you being paid? If you can't answer these questions and you can't accept the premises of questions, then why are you even meeting with us? At least turn up prepared and at least justify your poor job rather than making excuses and blaming other people. And I feel like that's the main talking points and the things that I really wanted to talk about tonight. Now, there was obviously conversations about the creation of a fan advisory board, and it's something that the club are considering. There was a talk about review of non-executive directors, and apparently there is an external an external review of non-executive directors, and the board is required. Nicholson says he'll take that suggestion on board. We know that means that it's going nowhere. And obviously there was talk about all different things. The fan survey was brought up, and they spoke about why the results of that haven't been published yet. A lot of it was obviously just in regards to the transfers, the recruitment, not qualifying for the Champions League. And what did they have for us? Fuck all. Fuck all. Is it a step forward in communicating with the fans? Of course it is, and I acknowledge that. Am I impressed with anything they had to say? Not particularly. Not I can't even speak now. Not particularly. You can take it as it is. So in closing, yeah, the meeting had been disappointing to the fans in attendance. No meaningful progress had been made. Yep, we can see that, and it's very believable. Nicholson acknowledged the frustrations amongst the attendees. Apparently, there is a commitment to reviewing supporter engagement and communication. All the same fucking jargon that anybody would give at a meeting like this. And they've offered further meetings with supporters groups on forward to continue dialogue. Yep. They think they hate us. They hate us. It's as simple as that. So yeah, that's kind of my run through of the main talking points on that minute of meeting. There's nothing to say that has. Listen, I was actually considering not making a video on it because what was in that document that we didn't already hear on Tuesday following the meeting when the rumours came out online about the meeting and when the first statements were released by both sides. I know whose side I stand with, of course. I think that's plain and easy to see. Some people might think that I'm just going to constantly shit in the board, and yeah, I will. Until they sort out how they run this club. Yes, that's exactly how it will work. So get used to it. We'll talk about things more in depth because this is a long video and I don't want to drag it on too long. So we'll do it in a live stream. We'll get talking about things and you can hear more of my opinions on maybe parts that I've skimmed over. But that's it for now. Yeah. Sick to the back teeth of it all, to be quite honest. Sick of them. Get them out. I think that one thing is plain to see from that meeting that it's time for change at Celtic.